first of two readers, not in a row, but the first of two folks who'll be talking about Pilsen. Paul Durica, who actually I had to email today to find out how it's pronounced. He said like Eureka or paprika, so. Paul Durica received his PhD from the University of Chicago this summer, so way to go, Paul. His writing has appeared most recently in Poetry and The Chicagoan, and he is co-editor with Bill Savage, some guy, of Chicago by Day and Night. An annotated reissue of an 1892 Guide to the City, and actually one of the raffle prizes tonight. They have autographed it. Both of them have autographed that, and you can get that for possibly the low price of $1, because that's low price of one raffle ticket, 15 for 10. I'm here all night, and you'll have to listen to this all night. Paul is the founder of Pocket Guide to Hell Tours and Reenactment, which most recently put on Stud's Place and the First Ward Ball. So you can find out more at pocketguidetohell.com. He'll be reading about Pilsen. Paul Durica.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to be reading a piece that appeared in Mash Ton, which is a quarterly about beer brewing, beer drinking, and beer culture that's actually nationally distributed but published in Bridgeport. So it's a little bit local. And I will be reading about Pilsen, but specifically I'll be reading about East Pilsen. I'm going to be talking a little bit about bar. I'm sorry that it's not Cole's. Cole's is a great neighborhood bar, and they're very gracious in inviting us to do this event here, and I'm grateful for that. So this is a piece called Illinois Nazi Brewers. People get to write good. Old bars gather within them unwritten histories of the neighborhoods that surround them. The stories collected like the odd assortment of bric-a-brac and brewery paraphernalia covering walls and filling the corners. And just as these objects sometimes feel like an eerie fit for the place, just why are all those Oddfellow banners hanging on the wall near the headless, light-up altar boys? So the tales do not always align with one's impression of the neighborhood. There's something about these histories that just doesn't ring true, and given the circumstances under which they circulate, at a bar, a few drinks in, suspicions often feel justified. Now, one of my favorite bars in Chicago, the Skylark, abounds in such stories, all of them as intriguing as they are difficult to verify. Longtime neighborhood residents claim that prior to serving its current youngish hip clientele, the bar catered to the needs of Mexican transvestites and called itself Club Internacional. Kid you not. But then others have claimed the Mexican transvestites bar was situated across the street, where there's now a taqueria. Newspapers confirm that the Skylark was formerly known as Cozy's Corner and run by a Hungarian. Before that, it was known as Kaufman's Tavern, where you could cash your check at the end of the work week. And basically, the Skylark only made the papers whenever somebody held it up. This is true of both Cozy's Corner and Kaufman's Tavern, right? Because they cashed checks, people would often rob it. That's how it would turn up in the newspapers. The bar has elegantly shaped Olympian mounts of porcelain in the men's room that some claim are the oldest functioning urinals in the city of Chicago. But how does one prove that? And just for a brief digression, the only people who really claim that are myself and my friend Nat. We actually went to the Farmer Library and found a plumbing catalog from 1906. And we're pretty certain that in the Skylark they have a model called the Eclipso. So if somebody find a urinal pre-1906, please point it out to me. I'm gonna wait for a second. I guess I can. That's great. All right. Now the Skylark entered the historical record in 1910 as a Burke Brothers brewing company tied house, and tied houses were basically the sort of 19th century equivalent of fast food franchises, right? So they would have independent owners kind of working for established breweries that would supply that owner with basically all of the glassware, lights, tables, chairs, and so forth, with the understanding that that place would serve only a specific type of brewery. So many of you guys are probably familiar with Schubas, right? And you've seen the Schlitz globe on the side. That's because it was a Schlitz tied house, and back in the day it would serve exclusively Schlitz beer. So imagine that. It's terrible. Barely made walking things. Now the evidence for this is concrete, literally. The bee carved into the facade, the bee that was carved into the facade was pointed out to me by Forgotten Chicago's Jacob Kaplan. Forgotten Chicago is a great series of kind of walking tours on the built environment. If you're not familiar with their work, I suggest you check it out. Now Burke Brothers dates to 1891 and once operated out of 2117 North Wayne Avenue, an industrial area near the intersection of South Court and Clybourne. It closed in 1950, having weathered Prohibition. For a time, during a period of expansion, when need exceeded the capacity to produce, it made use of the Schoenhofen Brewery's facilities. The remains of that Schoenhofen Brewery are mere blocks away from the Skylark. Schoenhofen is also at the center of one of the oddest stories I've ever heard told at the bar. Now the story goes something like this. Back in the 1930s, or perhaps early 1940s, the brewery served as a front for the German Nationalist Socialist Party, aka Nazis. A guy who walks his dogs daily past the old brewery building told me this, claiming that he'd heard it from multiple people who'd lived in the area all their lives. What's more, a sculpture of a giant beer bottle, which survived the war years, but not into the present, concealed radio equipment used by Nazi spies and saboteurs. Now, it's an unlikely but not impossible story. Chicago historically had a large ethnic German population, and there were probably a few brown shirters thrown into the mix long before Frank Collins came to town. As I read through old newspaper stories, I realize that there was a tinge of truth to the tale, not quite as colorful as the stories currently whispered around the grounds of the defunct brewery, but interesting nonetheless. Now here's what we can agree upon. German immigrant Peter Schoenhofen started his brewery in 1860 at the corner of 12th and Jefferson, before moving it to 18th and Canalport. It remained in the family until 1924. Material traces like the Burke Brothers bees on the side of the Skylark remain to corroborate these simple facts. Two of the Schoenhof buildings that you can still see today reflect different eras in the brewery's history. The 1886 administration building by architect Adolf Kudel sports the brewer's star on its facade. A mark of professionalism and purity, the star is reflective of late 19th century tastes, while the building is reflective of late 19th century tastes, while the sleek and modern powerhouse designed by Schmidt, Garden, and Martin dates from 1902. Now another true story is that both buildings appear in the Blues Brothers, 1980, director John Landis, when Jake and Elwood drive through the alley between them on their way to the fictional St. Helen of the Blessed Shroud orphanage. Now, along with a few other small buildings, the administrative offices and the powerhouse are all that survive what was once a beer-making city within the city, consisting of 17 structures. The Schoenhofen Brewery reached peak production in 1910, churning out 1.2 million barrels of tasty, frothy brew. Its most popular brand was Edelweiss, heralded as the, quote, pure food beer, which drinkers were told in a 1908 Chicago Tribune advertisement to, quote, drink with their meals. It aids digestion. Edelweiss's purported purity derived from the fact that it was made from artesian water from the wells located beneath the brewery itself. Which is very close to the Chicago River. How could something so wholesome become linked to nefarious Nazi spies? Well, first off, the Schoenhofen Brewery did come under suspicion during a war, but it was World War I, not World War II, when the American Protective League, basically a forerunner to our present-day Tea Party patriots, began to question the loyalty of the owner. This is great. Count Otto Bob von Oberstadt. Yeah, that's the name of the owner. Otto Bob von Oberstadt. Bob had married old Peter Schoenhofen's daughter, Elizabeth, emigrating from Deutschland to take over operation of the brewery. Advocating U.S. neutrality and peace, Bob showed obvious sympathies to the Kaiser. On December 9th, 1918, the Tribune reported a raid by U.S. Marshals and the APL on the Count's estate in Woodstock, a suburb of Chicago where Groundhog Day, 1983, director Harold Ramis, starring Bill Murray, was shot. Which reminds me, did you know that the role for Peter Venkman, played by Murray in Ghostbusters, was originally written for John Belushi, who played Joliet Jake Blues? Now that's the short fact you pick up in a bar. What you don't hear are stories like the one about the raid on Bob's country estate. I mean, who even remembers anything about the First World War in Chicago, where even the mayor, William Hale Big Bill Thompson, was pro-German, and in another old yarn, threatened to punch King George V of England in the nose should His Highness ever turn up on State Street. Just as Thompson never got his wish, the Woodstock raid didn't turn up anything more incriminating. It's like the sea. Sorry. The Woodstock raid didn't turn up anything more incriminating than 100 iron-bound, securely locked trunks, which the family chauffeur, also a Hun, claimed, quote, contained clothing and household things. The marshals did not locate the suspected, quote, powerful wireless apparatus, but the government nevertheless seized the brewery. The Schoenhofen family spent the better part of a decade seeking restitution. Now, the Woodstock raid and the seizure of the brewery during World War I are, I believe, the sources of the neighborhood story about Nazi spies. Or maybe not. There's no way to know for certain how these stories start. Maybe some old-timer, upon the brewery's closing, mentioned something about the Schoenhofen family spying for the Germans, and the person seated next to him at the bar thought the guy meant Nazi Germans, which is an entirely understandable mistake. Or maybe some kids growing up near the brewery in the years after the war saw the brewer star, which closely resembles the Star of David, and being kids got all of the details horribly, completely, utterly wrong, but spread the story nonetheless. World War II Nazi spies are easier to hate than World War I Kaiser sympathizers, who probably made up a decent portion of the neighborhood's residents at the time. For a story as local lore to resonate, to survive so many conversations in a bar or out on the sidewalk, it needs to have sharp edges, as clearly carved as the brewer's star or that bee, with none of the points softened by moral ambiguity. Now, Chicagoans should actually commend the Schoenhofen Brewery for its contributions to local culture, rather than be wary of its past. During Prohibition, the brewery tapped those same artesian wells and called forth into the world a carbonated beverage that tasted like lime jello and left the drinker's tongue an emerald hue. In 1919, the Schoenhofen Brewery created Green River. I'm glad people know it. Which for a brief moment, and this is historical fact, which for a brief moment rivaled Coke in popularity, Coca-Cola. Today it is consumed primarily around St. Patrick's Day, when the Chicago River matches its color, and news stories emerge for the consumption of immense quantities of beer, all to follow a current of their own. Thank you.